Hey, this is George. Have you ever heard of Anchor.fm? It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. Number one, it's free. Number two, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so you can hear it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Check out Anchor.fm on the iOS and Android systems.
Need psychotherapy online or in person? Check out tinyurl.com/THT psychotherapy. The George Brassey podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George, 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1@gmail.com.
Freeze doesn't stop Chicago Heights City Council from taking care of business. Freeze doesn't stop Chicago Heights City Council from taking care of business, Chicago Heights, Illinois, despite some members of the council being absent, freezing weather and meeting remotely due to COVID restrictions. On Tuesday night, the Chicago Heights City Council approved a number of projects to continue moving forward the city's beautification projects. Architectural services. With Alderman Vincent Zaranti sitting in as acting mayor for Mayor David Gonzalez, the council approved an agreement for architectural services with TRIA Architecture. Under the $23,000 agreement, TRIA will provide a space needs analysis of the municipal garage and water department facilities. The company will analyze existing facilities and determine whether an upgrade or a totally new facility is needed, based on current and future needs. TRIA has provided architectural services for other local municipalities such as Country Club Hills, designing its amphitheater, storage and fleet maintenance facilities, and upgrading its recreational center. Morton Arboretum Grant. The council voted to accept an award of $15,000 from the Morton Arboretum through its Urban and Community Forestry Grant. The grant will pay for a tree inventory of the city. Funding for the grant is provided by the United States Department of Agriculture Forest Service through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program. It offers urban and community forestry grants to municipalities, which are required to pass a tree preservation/protection ordinance before the end of the grant period. Engineering services. The council also approved proposals totaling $842,000 for engineering services for various city infrastructure projects. Chief of Staff Karen Zarant said the projects include sewer and resurfacing work around the city. The council approved an agreement with Grand Capital, North America, LLC, to induce the sale and development of the city-owned real estate at 560 and 570 West Lincoln Highway. Jack Hines, city economic development consultant, said the parcels are the sites of the former Lorenzetti's restaurant and car lot next to it. Grand Rapid Capital has done a number of developments in the city. In other business, Chief of Staff Karen Zarant gave the council an update on January's Illinois Department of Public Health vaccination clinic, hosted by the city. She said about 250 people registered online. The city plans to hold another vaccination clinic, in conjunction with IDPH, in February. Chicago Heights Fire Chief Jeffrey Springer announced the promotion of Captain Tony Mascalino to Assistant Fire Chief. The council approved a redevelopment agreement to induce the sale of the city-owned surplus real estate at 1902 Euclid Avenue, through the city's Abandoned Property Acquisition Program. And the city's city towing services agreement was renewed. Freeze doesn't stop Chicago Heights City Council from taking care of business.
Before we get to the interview, I just want to tell you about our newest sponsor. Union Signs and Printing. Union Signs and Printing is a union sign shop located near Chicago, Illinois, that specializes in the production of corrugated plastic lawn signs used in applications ranging from political and election usages to unions, schools, and businesses. They also produce a vast array of other products, including American-made, union-printed t-shirts, banners, bio cards, literature, door hangers, business cards, and trifold. Get a hold of Union Signs and Printing at 815-740-1688 or find them on the internet at unionsignsandprinting.com. And don't forget to tell them you heard about their services on the George Brassey podcast.
Hey, George, I think we finally got each other.
I'm so glad to welcome my friend and pastor, Rebecca Husbands. She is the co-lead pastor of Calvary Assembly of God Church. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. Glad we got the technology to work.
Absolutely. Well, Rebecca, we on this podcast like to start off just by asking our guests a little bit about their origins. Tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming a pastor.
Oh, goodness. Well, a lot of people would say it's kind of in the DNA. My parents are pastors, have been my entire life. Their parents were pastors. My great-grandparents were pastors. However, like every good pastor's kid, you kind of rebelled from that for a little bit. And they never pushed that on us either. They very much were, this is what we believe, and we're going to go to church together as a family, and here's why we believe it. But you all should do what you want to do with your life. And so I definitely set up on a different path and told everybody there's no way I will ever be a pastor or marry a pastor. And obviously God had other plans. When we got married, John was not a pastor. He worked for UPS, and I worked in doing title work. And we sat down and started talking about the feeling that we both had independently, that was the direction to go in life. And so we set out our plan for how things would work. And we said, okay, we feel this call to go into ministry. We feel like that's what we need to do. So here's our 1-year plan. And we're going to pay off all of these debts and then get back into school for John, and do what needs to happen to make that happen. And the very next day that we finally said, this is the direction we're going to go and we're going to set it out, the very next day, John went into work and they said, we're letting all management on this shift go. And the package that they gave in severance paid off those bills that we had determined we were going to pay off in a year anyway. And so we said, okay, God, you know better than we know. And obviously you want us to do it now. And so that's kind of where we started in ministry.
And at this point, you're how old, Pastor Becky?
At that point, we had a 1-month-old child. So that was, oh goodness, 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago. So I was about 24 years old. I had finished school already. And that just, we didn't think that was the direction life was going to go. But when you feel like that's what you're supposed to do, I guess you got to do it, right? And God just sped up our timeline.
Your parents are both pastors. Are they pastors in the same denomination that you eventually became a pastor in? And what is that denomination?
So we are Assembly of God pastors, and that is the denomination that my parents and grandparents were from. My great-grandmother was Methodist, and then converted to Assemblies of God when she was pretty young. My husband's parents have been both Assemblies of God and Church of God in Christ pastors. Both churches really basically believe the same thing. In fact, we have something called cooperative fellowship. What that means is that a pastor from an Assembly of God church that has credentials as an Assembly of God pastor can pastor a Church of God in Christ church and vice versa. So we've kind of always been in fellowship together as far as churches are concerned. So yeah, we're in the same church organization. My parents were very involved in community when I was young. And so we lived in a small town for quite my third, fourth, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, right around in there, when everybody is, if you come up in a Catholic church, you're going to classes, right? Catechism classes. And so I went to catechism classes with my friends because what do you do in a small town? I went to the classes at the Methodist church that they teach at about the same age because, again, what do you do in a small town? So I'd had experience with quite a few churches and church groups, but Assemblies of God is what I've been my whole life.
When you are going and learning about the different religions at a young age, is that encouraged by your parents, even though they're in a leadership role at a different denomination?
My parents have never been the one to say, you have to go to this church, although it's who they are and it's what they believe. And they were always open with what they believed. They definitely did not have a problem with us learning other things. And the truth is, no matter what of those churches you go to, you're worshiping God, you're recognizing Jesus is Christ, and we may get about it in different means, but it's okay to learn about that. It's okay to explore that. It's okay to get along.
Tell us a little bit about how you end up from the small town you grew up in, Missouri, right?
Oh, my parents pastored in Missouri, Texas, and Illinois.
How do you end up later, once you decide to go into the job of ministry, how do you end up in Illinois?
Well, when we made that decision, John and I together, we actually were in Illinois. We were living in Governor's Place Apartments, right there on that Homewood Flossmoor line. And like I said, we were both in just regular jobs here. His job had brought him here. I'd taken a position here for work. And so that's where we were at, living at that time. Mm-hmm. And when we made that decision, we actually moved back to Missouri because we had that support from my parents. And my parents are pretty cool parents. They still to this day, if I called them and said, hey, life has taken a turn and I don't know where we're going to live, they'd be like, come home, it's okay. So, they were like, come on down and we'll help you with baby and support you through the decision to go back and take classes, and we'll help however we can help, and so we went back to the St. Louis area, and that's where we started ministry. And we were youth pastors there, and worship pastors there, and then senior pastors there. And then one of the couples out of our Flossmoor campus, we looked up one Sunday morning and they were standing at the back of the church, and they said, we have come to get our new pastor. And so we talked to them that day about transitioning to pastor in Flossmoor. And that's what brought us back here.
Tell us a little bit about the two different churches that you pastor now.
Well, like I said, we came to pastor the Flossmoor campus. Oh my goodness, it's been like 4 years ago now. It's been a while when we started the process of the Chicago Heights campus. And actually, Pastor John and I again had this conversation about where we kind of felt ourselves going in ministry. We have always felt like a church needs to reflect the community that it's in. And so the Flossmoor campus, we said, here's what we feel God's saying for it. It needs to look like the community it's in. And that means that the average age, the racial makeup, the family makeup, the economic makeup. This is the community we're in. This is who we need to be embracing. This is what we need to be looking at. If we're not meeting the needs of our community, if we don't look like our community, if everyone in our community doesn't feel welcome in our building, then we're not sharing the love of Christ like he's called us to. And so that was our mission there. And then God had laid Chicago Heights on our heart. And we said, our goal was to look at how can we better reach Chicago Heights. And within a matter of about 2 months of us having that conversation, we received a phone call from the church organization, the Assemblies of God. We call them presbyters. We received a phone call from the presbyter that said, hey, we have this campus in Chicago Heights, and we don't want to close the doors on the campus. Would you all be interested in helping to support that campus and helping to keep a church in the community? And of course, our heart is that no church closes because simply the work isn't done. And so we jumped right on that and said, absolutely, that's what God has laid on our heart, and we know why. And so that's how we came to have the building in Chicago Heights, which is in your ward, and which is how we met you too. So we took that campus, and there, by the time that the pastor and his family and the couple of people that were driving in from Indiana just to continue to support him were gone, there was nobody left. But that's okay. We went about it the same way. We want the church to reflect the community that it's in. And so, we want people from Chicago Heights to feel comfortable coming to a church in Chicago Heights and know that it's theirs. It's their church. It's their community. It's their building. And so that's kind of how we came here.
One thing I find really interesting about your church and your brand of pastoring is there's a lot of things going on all the time in your church. Talk about some of the stuff you've done for the community and that you continue to do for the community.
Well, and I will say, you may not hear a totally quiet background. I'm not sure. I've hidden myself in a room in the church right now, hoping that it will hide some of the background noise. But right now in the building, I have a young adult and one of our teenagers that's upstairs in the recording studio working on some new worship music that they're working on recording, trying to find just the right guitar riffs. And then I have 3 other people that are in the building right now, and they're putting together some school supply kits because, as most people know, our kids have all been at home, since this pandemic started, and they're getting ready to go back to school in buildings. And most of us buy school supplies in September. I was a teacher for a long time. I know by March, kids don't have a lot of school supplies left. And so we want to be able to just provide a few things for those kids and parents, so that as they walk back in the building, they've got some paper and pencils and pens, and the teachers aren't having to buy them all. And so they're putting together school supply kits now. And I am so blessed by church members and community members that just get alongside and join that same vision that, the Word of God says, I was hungry and you fed me. I was a widow and you took care of me. And that's what the Bible teaches us to do, is to take care of widows and orphans, to take care of those in need, to be the love of Christ, not just talk about it. And so we do a food pantry every Tuesday, and that actually arose because of the COVID mess. Everybody's going to be home. They're going to be out of work, or they're not working the same. We have to meet that need. I can't look at that need and not do something.
Pastor, talk about how many people are coming to the food pantry on a weekly basis.
So this week was a little lower. We had about 300 families. A lot of, when the weather's better, it'll be closer to about 500 families. We've had a couple weeks where it's been more. I will say during the week, we usually get a text message or phone call with a few more families that will take food to their house because they're shut in or can't make it. And we have about 20 families on average during a week that we're delivering food to as well.
You guys definitely live your mission over there, and it's a beautiful thing, and I'm very grateful to have you as a friend and a pastor, and in my city council district as well. Pastor Becky, what are two books that you would recommend to the audience that have been really influential to you as a person?
Oh, goodness. Well, see, now you got me, because my degree was in English. So when you start talking about books, that's a whole nother thing. I will give you two that have been a big influence on my life. And the first one, it's not going to sound real spiritual, I'm sorry. But in 1994, there was a book that was released, and I picked up a copy of it because I'm always wanting to buy books. I have more bookshelves in my house than I probably have beds. But it was a book of selected poems of Langston Hughes. And I picked up that book and just began to read it. Now, when I read that and when I study, the Harlem Renaissance and that, it does something to me. And you can probably hear me because I kind of choke up when I talk about it. But to hear someone's heart of what it was like to not be able to sit at the table, to have dinner with the family because of the color of your skin, to not be accepted because of something you can't fix. That just changes who you are. Now, for me, that determined what I studied in college. I took English as a major because that's what I wanted to study, because I found that through my reading, through my writing, through what I did, I could, learn, grow, be a different person than honestly what schools were teaching us to be. And that's sad because I have a teaching degree, right? But what I was learning in school was not what I was reading in that book. We didn't talk about some of that stuff. And so that is a book, honestly, that's changed who I am. And I would suggest this to anybody. Read outside of who you are in your experience. Don't limit yourself to books that are just what you know, who you are, what your family upbringing is, what your nationality or religion are. Read outside of who you are. Learn and grow, because it will change who you are. Now, the other book is maybe a little more what everybody would expect me to say. But there's a book written by Tim Hughes, and it's called Here I Am to Worship. And that is just a phenomenal book that really just talks about our purpose as Christians is to worship God, and that if we would just worship and not worry about all of the other stuff, then we really will love and not worry about all the other stuff.
Pastor Becky, where can the audience find information about you or the church on the internet?
Well, the website is calvaryflossmoor.com, and there's a tab that says One Church, Two Campuses, I think. Yeah, it says One Church, Two Locations. And that has information on both campuses and on the online campus. That has information on Chicago Heights, the ESL classes, the food pantry, the classes that are getting ready to launch for kids, the ones that we thought we were going to launch in 2020, but obviously are going to happen this year. All of that is on there. And then we're also on Facebook. It's Calvary Assembly Heights Campus. Or you can look us up on YouTube. We have a channel on YouTube, Calvary Assembly, Illinois.
Pastor Becky, what time are services usually on Sunday?
Services at the Heights campus are at 3:00 on Sunday. When we're not in the middle of a pandemic, then we have lunch together at 1:00 first, and hopefully, prayerfully, by Easter we'll be back to that.
Pastor Rebecca Husbands, thank you for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me, George.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Help George stay on the Chicago Heights City Council. Go and donate today at tinyurl.com/AldermanGeorge 2023. Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.